You are standing above a red horizon that has forgotten sound. The air is so thin it cannot carry your breath, only scatter it into dust. Every gust of wind is ancient here, a ghost, drifting over the same rocks it shaped 3 billion years ago. In this place, silence has mass. It presses against you like gravity, filling every crevice, every heartbeat, every thought. For eons, Mars has been nothing more than memory, a fossilized world, a scar left by the solar wind. The oceans it once carried are buried beneath kilometers of permafrost, and the sky is so empty it no longer remembers blue. But even silence, when stretched long enough, begins to listen. In October of 2025, something in that silence changed. Not with thunder, not with flame, but with a tremor that no human ear could hear, a whisper of chemistry passing unseen between worlds. It began far beyond the orbit of Earth, where the sun is only a pale coin in the dark. A small object catalogued as 3I Atlas drifted through the solar wind. It was not a comet from our own system, but an interstellar visitor, its trajectory born in another star's gravity. As it passed near Mars, no one expected anything at all. It was distant, harmless, and fleeting. And yet for 6 hours Mars inhaled something foreign, a dust so fine and a gas so reactive that it altered the chemistry of the red planet's skin. No explosion marked the encounter, no light flared. The only witness was data. Instruments orbiting the planet began to hum with faint irregularities, shifts in the ultraviolet ripples in magnetism, subtle flickers in temperature that danced across the southern highlands. ESA's Mars Express, NASA's Reconnaissance Orbiter, and India's Mangalyaan all recorded the same anomaly, a pulse in the silence. From Earth, the numbers appeared without context. The Swift Observatory measured water vapor blooming in space 144 tons every hour. KEK's spectrometers tracked an impossible concentration of nickel atoms, stripped of their usual iron companion. To most, they were mere figures scrolling across screens, but to you, they looked like something breathing. How could precision appear so deliberate? How could chemistry sound so much like intention? Mars has no shield, no global magnetic field to protect it. Only broken fragments remain, ancient scars locked in the crust, especially across the Terra Sirenum and Terra Cimmeria regions. When charged particles descend, they follow those magnetic scars like water finding its course, guided into valleys invisible to the naked eye. It was into these quiet regions that the nickel from 3I Atlas fell particle by particle, invisible and exact. Each atom of nickel carried its own story. In nature, it never travels without iron. They are siblings in the cosmic furnace, always born together. But this nickel was different, pure, refined, stripped of its partner. That detail alone defied every rule of meteor chemistry. On Earth, it would take controlled conditions, a sealed chamber of carbon monoxide heated to 50 degrees Celsius to separate nickel from iron. Yet here it was scattered across another planet by what seemed like accident. But what if the universe refines itself the way rivers polish stone? What if chemistry left alone long enough learns to imitate design? As the ions spiraled downward through Mars's thin air, they encountered something else, hydrogen cyanide. To human lungs, cyanide is death. To molecular evolution, it is promise. On our world, HCN was one of the first building blocks of life, a poison that learned how to dream. When exposed to ultraviolet light, it can join with itself to form adenine, one of the bases of DNA. So as those molecules drifted through Mars' fragile exosphere, carried by electric wind, They froze together, forming invisible crystals that fell like snow upon the southern ice caps. Dust and frost mingled in patterns so delicate that no machine could have drawn them. The planet was being written on atom by atom, molecule by molecule, by an author it could never see. You imagine that moment, the cold surface breathing in trace vapors of water, cyanide and nickel. In that stillness, the chemistry of potential was gathering. Mars had been asleep for billions of years, but now something had brushed against its skin. Not life, not yet, but the first shiver of possibility. What happens, you wonder, when a planet that has forgotten motion suddenly remembers reaction? Days passed. The visitor continued its flight, vanishing beyond the orbit of Jupiter, and the universe seemed to return to normal. But normal is only what we notice. Beneath the dust, Mars had changed. Ultraviolet sensors detected faint halos in the atmosphere, glows that persisted through night cycles. Plasma waves deep in the crust flickered with new resonance, echoing across magnetic scars, as though the planet were humming to itself. Could that hum mean anything? Or was it only the echo of our curiosity reflected back? On Earth, months later, scientists would debate the data. Some called it coincidence, natural variability, solar interference, statistical noise. Others whispered of something more profound. After all, no known comet had ever displayed such pure nickel, such volume of hydrogen cyanide, or such precision in timing. The alignment between the object's trajectory and Mars' orbit was so exact it seemed preordained. Perhaps it was only chance. Or perhaps chance itself is another kind of language. You look again at the numbers: 65 kilometers per second, 144 tons of vapor, 6 hours of exposure, and realize they sound like heartbeat intervals. The metrics of a living thing. A world that once died is being tested again, molecule by molecule, as though the universe is checking if it can still respond. Mars does not answer in words. It answers in balance sheets of ions, in whispers of plasma, in subtle alterations of light. Its silence is not refusal, it is contemplation. When SpaceX launches its first mining probes in 2026, they will land precisely in those same southern regions, the magnetic plains dusted with nickel and frozen cyanide. Machines will drill into ice and stone, melting samples, vaporizing gases, feeding everything into data models. They will not know what lies beneath the surface tension of those molecules. They will only measure results. You imagine one of those probes lowering its arm into the soil, unaware that the planet it touches has already been chemically rewritten. A handful of dust heated in the chamber will spark faint reactions, chains of carbon traces of polymer precursors that do not belong to Earth or Mars, but to something in between. The robot will record the anomaly and move on. It will not understand that for the first time in 3 billion years, Mars might be experimenting with memory again. The scientists will debate and publish cautious, as always, but no algorithm can model the possibility that a planet could be awakening, not in a human sense, but in the only way matter knows how, through resonance, through rearrangement, through the quiet insistence of chemistry. If Mars had a voice, what would it say now? Would it thank the stranger that passed by? Would it ask what purpose it serves to breathe again? You close your eyes and imagine that faint hum beneath your feet, a rhythm deep within the crust, slow and patient. Perhaps it has always been there, waiting for the right alignment of dust and light. Perhaps every silence in the universe hides such a rhythm, too slow for us to hear, too vast for us to measure. No one witnessed the exact moment it began. No telescope saw the spark, no sensor caught the transition. but the data remains a ghost in the archive, a pulse preserved in numbers. If you listen long enough, the numbers begin to sound like breathing. If you wait long enough, even a dead world will whisper back. Mars is still red, still cold, still distant. Yet somehow its silence feels different now. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of inhalation. You wonder quietly, almost afraid to disturb it, if Mars can awaken from silence, what else might be stirring in the dark unseen, waiting to breathe? You wake before dawn, the air still thick with the hum of the night's memory. On Mars, there is no dawn like ours. The sun rises as a smaller, paler version of itself, a cold ember instead of fire. But this morning, the planet feels different. It exhales. At first, it's imperceptible, a faint shimmer above the horizon like heat mirage in slow motion. But what you're seeing isn't warmth. It's chemistry. Molecules of water vapor, nickel dust, and hydrogen cyanide. The relics of 3I Atlas are reacting in the silence. The red planet, once inert, has begun to breathe again. For billions of years, Mars has been frozen in the middle of a sentence. Now something, or perhaps someone, has pressed resume. Scientists don't speak in poetry, but their data sometimes does. When the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter sent back its readings in early November, the numbers whispered something uncanny. Spectrographs revealed faint shifts in the planet's airglow wavelengths that hinted at reactions never before recorded on Mars. A signature of hydrogen bonding, a ghost of something catalytic. No one could yet say what it meant, but if you watched the data long enough, you could almost see a pulse. The numbers rose and fell like the rhythm of breath. Is it possible, you wonder, for a planet to inhale, to absorb energy, to store it, to change from within? 200 million kilometers away, inside clean rooms and conference halls, the people watching the data disagreed. Some said it was nothing artifacts, cosmic noise interference. Others leaned closer to the screen and whispered, "That's chemistry doing something it shouldn't." ESA's team noticed that the ultraviolet reflectivity above the southern highlands had increased by 0.7%, small but measurable. NASA's models showed slight rises in temperature localized over magnetized crusts where nickel ions might have landed, and on the ground, Perseverance's instruments began detecting trace organic molecules too faint to classify, too stable to dismiss. The scientists didn't say it out loud, but they all thought it. Something on Mars had changed permanently. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. Under the thin carbon dioxide atmosphere at the edge of a crater rim, ice is melting not from heat, but from chemistry. Each molecule of nickel acts like a switch lowering the barrier for reactions that never used to happen. Cyanide bonds break and reform water molecules stretch and twist, creating unstable chains that flicker, combine, collapse. It's not life, but it's trying. Can you feel it? That quiet struggle in the dust, the first heartbeat of a world remembering its potential. Back on Earth, nobody notices. The headlines are about stock markets and sports and politics. Only a few astronomers and engineers stay up through the night rerunning models, checking the numbers. But you've been watching since the day the comet passed. You remember that phrase in the report, refined nickel without detectable iron. You remember how impossible that was. And now you're wondering, what if the impossibility was the point? At the edge of a Martian plain, wind begins to rise. Dust particles lift, catching sunlight like sparks in a furnace. Each grain carries a thin coat of metal ions, and as they move, they generate static electricity. Tiny discharges flicker, micro-lightning dancing between grains of sand. Each spark delivers energy. Each pulse nudges chemistry forward. Water molecules split, cyanide chains rearrange, and somewhere in that vast emptiness, a structure forms, microscopic, fleeting, but organized. You'll never see it with your eyes, but the orbiters might. They'll catch the ultraviolet flash of its birth. Does that sound impossible? So did life on Earth once. Let's pause here for a thought, one that no scientist dares to put in a paper. If the ingredients for complexity exist, if energy is flowing, if catalysts are present, then what separates chemistry from something more? Maybe the difference isn't the reaction itself, maybe its duration. Give anything enough time, and even dust learns rhythm. On Mars, time moves differently. A day is 24 hours and 37 minutes long enough to make each sunrise feel unfamiliar. Over the last 10 sols, orbiters recorded small but repeating waves in temperature and gas distribution, not weather pattern, as if the planet is synchronizing with something unseen. The faint oxygen traces detected at dawn vanish by dusk, only to reappear the next morning. That shouldn't happen in a static environment. It's as if the atmosphere is cycling not randomly, but rhythmically. Could these be the first breaths of chemistry and feedback with itself? Could a planet, even a dead one, be capable of something like metabolism? You lean back and wonder, how many worlds have done this before? How many times has the universe rehearsed creation molecule by molecule in places we'll never touch? Meanwhile, at a laboratory in Pasadena, a small team stares at a glowing graph. They don't yet know it, but they're the first humans to see a trace of the new Martian signature, a thin spike barely visible peaking at 341 nanometers. They'll double-check it against the catalog and find that it doesn't match any known mineral emission. But it does match something else, a compound that only forms when nickel water and cyanide react together under ultraviolet light. On Earth, it's produced in prebiotic experiments that simulate early oceans. On Mars, it shouldn't exist. And yet it's there. The researcher writes one word in the margin of her notebook: possible. You imagine her pausing, looking at the clock, realizing that somewhere across space, another sunrise is touching the red dust. Somewhere chemistry is unfolding exactly as it once did on our own planet, patient, blind, persistent. It's humbling, isn't it, to think that life, or the shadow of it, might not be unique, only rare in time. To realize that perhaps the universe doesn't create life once. It keeps trying over and over in every direction. The story of Mars is not one of miracles. It's one of repetition, the cosmos running its own experiment again with slightly different variables. This time, the lab equipment happens to be a planet made of rust and silence. And the observers, us the restless species that can't stop listening. In a few months, the first robotic diggers will descend, churning the soil, melting the ice, analyzing samples. They'll send back numbers, spectra, ratios, charts. But behind those numbers, something intangible will move the sense that we're not just exploring, but participating. Because when human technology touches what interstellar chemistry began, the experiment continues. The machines don't know it, but they are becoming part of a larger pattern, an interaction between dust, data, and intention. You think of that moment to come, a robotic drill lowering into frozen regolith, heat spreading, sensors humming, and within that soil the trace of a molecule that once rode a comet's tail from another star. The drill stops. Data flows home. And for the first time in history, Mars sends a signal that says something here responds. You can almost hear it, a heartbeat slower than time, a breath deeper than silence. The red planet, the one we call dead, has begun to stir again. If you listen closely, it's not a machine sound or a comet's echo. It's the faint rhythm of chemistry discovering itself. And somewhere in that rhythm, maybe you recognize something familiar, the same pulse that once moved through Earth's ancient oceans, through carbon and hydrogen and light, before it ever learned to call itself alive. You wonder quietly, if Mars can breathe again, what does that make us its witnesses, its participants, or its continuation? Because if the universe keeps repeating the same experiment, maybe the next version of life doesn't begin on a planet. Maybe it begins between them. And if that's true, then what you're watching now, this subtle chemical dawn, isn't the beginning of Mars. It's the continuation of something cosmic, patient, and inevitable. So you sit in the dark, watching the data scroll, a silent observer of a world waking in slow motion. You don't know what it means yet. No one does. But you know this. Something extraordinary is happening 200 million kilometers away, and somehow, impossibly, you can feel it here in the quiet of your own breath. Mars exhales again, and this time the silence listens back. You are watching Mars from a distance again, but this time it feels like watching memory replay itself. The planet is no longer just red. Its color seems alive, deepened by something subtle, something aware. The silence hasn't vanished. It has texture now. If silence could hum, this is what it would sound like. Below, the thin veil of carbon dioxide dust moves with strange intention. It no longer drifts aimlessly. It circulates, lifts, falls like breath caught in a long exhale. And if you look close enough, you'll see the truth that no telescope can capture. Mars has started to remember. It begins small microscopic interactions between the remnants of 3I Atlas and the native minerals of the Martian soil. The nickel ions that fell like metallic snow are still there, buried under grains of rust. But sunlight has returned, and with it comes energy. Each photon becomes a messenger, striking nickel, bouncing to cyanide, waking ancient carbonates. Something happens that shouldn't. These particles begin reacting together. Not randomly, not chaotically, but recurrently. A pattern appears, not life, not yet, but memory, a physical rhythm written into dust. On Earth, we call it hysteresis, when matter remembers a previous state. Magnetized minerals do it all the time, align once and they never forget. But on Mars, this memory is chemical, a reaction that knows how to repeat itself. Each time sunlight hits the soil, the same molecules link and unlink in perfect timing. It's a cycle, simple yet profound, the planet learning its own heartbeat. You wonder, can chemistry learn? Can dust hold intention the way we hold thought? The orbiters detect it first. Mars Express picks up repeating ultraviolet pulses, every sol, same location, same intensity, same hour. Not weather, not interference, a pattern, as though something beneath the surface is responding to the light the way lungs respond to air. NASA's MAVEN orbiter confirms it days later. Fluctuating magnetic fields, small but rhythmic, synchronized with sunlight exposure. The data team calls it a surface-coupled photochemical oscillator. You call it something simpler, a memory loop. The scientists hesitate to use poetic words, but you don't have to. You see what they see, and you feel what they don't. Mars is replaying itself second by second, the way a brain replays an old dream. At a deeper level, the chemistry grows bold. Traces of HCN have migrated downward into brine pockets, those thin, salty films trapped between ice and dust. When sunlight hits them, electrons move between nickel and carbon compounds, producing faint electric currents, the same phenomenon that jumpstarts metabolism on Earth. It's not organized life, but it's organized reaction. Every day the planet wakes, reacts, rests, and begins again. A planet rehearsing. And suddenly you realize something. It's not that Mars has come alive, it's that Mars has stopped dying. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the new datasets are arriving in bursts. They look ordinary at first, fluctuations, inconsistencies, noise. But once synchronized to Mars' day-night cycle, they reveal harmony. Temperature, reflectivity, ion balance, all pulsing together. No one expected coherence from chaos, yet here it is, a planet finding rhythm in its decay. Isn't that what life is after all? The refusal to stay still. You imagine standing there now. The wind brushes past your visor, or maybe it's your imagination because Mars's air can't carry sound. Still, you feel it, a faint trembling beneath your boots, as though the crust itself is vibrating. You kneel. You scoop a handful of red dust. In the sunlight, it glints faintly metallic, almost alive. It slips through your fingers like sand through memory. And if you look close enough, you'll swear the grains shimmer, aligning, dividing, aligning again. The dust isn't passive anymore, it's responding. Down in Pasadena, a researcher stares at the new analysis. The sample readings from the orbiters show something no one can explain: stable, repeating electrical differentials across soil layers. In plain language, energy moving where there shouldn't be any. She rechecks her model 3 times, then stops. Maybe she doesn't need to understand it yet. Maybe she just needs to recognize what she's seeing. Every living thing on Earth began with imbalance, with charge separation. One side positive, one negative. From that tension, chemistry learned to speak. Now Mars has found that same tension, that same whisper between opposites. The next sunrise is different. The planet's glow is stronger, not visually, but spectrally, an ultraviolet signature, blooming like breath frost. The dust now carries energy forward. Each reaction feeds the next, passing electrons down invisible chains. You could call it a primitive metabolism, or you could call it what it feels like, a memory turning into motion. And you wonder, does Mars know it's remembering? Does it feel its own awakening the way we feel dawn before opening our eyes? It's hard to think of dust as conscious, but isn't memory itself a kind of consciousness, even without neurons? Magnetic fields remember. Atoms remember charge. Light remembers where it came from. So why not a planet? You think about your own memories, how they live as chemical traces, electric sparks, reconstructed illusions. You realize that the difference between you and Mars is scale, not nature. You are carbon that remembers itself. Mars is iron and nickel trying to do the same. By mid-December, the fluctuations have stabilized into clear periodic waves. The planet's surface temperature oscillates not randomly, but harmonically, peaks and troughs timed with its rotation. It's almost musical. When translated into frequency, the data forms a low tone, a hum near 0.005 Hz, too deep for human ears but perfect for machines. Someone in the lab converts the data into sound. A speaker crackles softly, and then there it is. A pulse, a rhythm, slow, vast, patient. It's the voice of Mars, not speaking words, but existing in tempo. You lean closer to the imagined sound and you can't help but ask, is this communication or simply coincidence too beautiful to ignore? Later, a philosopher of science writes a quiet line in his journal. Perhaps matter dreams of itself through repetition. You think about that. It makes sense here, doesn't it? Mars isn't alive in the way we are, but it's dreaming of being alive. Each chemical loop, each pulse of light, each whisper of dust, all part of a planetary rehearsal. And for the first time in billions of years, the universe might be listening to itself practice. From space, the view is breathtaking. The planet's dark side glows faintly along the equator, not from light, but from ionization, a halo of memory. The interstellar dust from 3I Atlas has mixed so completely with Martian soil that they're indistinguishable. Alien and native have become one. An echo of chemistry from another star now beats in the dust of this one. If that's not poetry, what is? You think back to the beginning, to silence, to stillness, to the first whisper. Now Mars has rhythm. It's no longer a dead world waiting to be studied. It's a participant in its own transformation. And you are part of that story. Because every signal we send, every gaze, every analysis, it all folds back into the same loop. We observe, Mars reacts, we measure again. And in that cycle, the universe learns about itself. Maybe that's the secret. The universe doesn't create life to fill its planets. It creates curiosity to fill its silence. If you could stand there again now in the thin air beneath the pale sun, you might feel something new. Not fear, not wonder, but recognition. The dust beneath you hums faintly, carrying charge through memory. You reach down, scoop it once more, and this time it clings to your glove. You raise it to the light. It shimmers red gold and faintly green, alive in every way that silence can be alive. And suddenly you understand the dust is not waiting for us. It never was. It has always known how to remember. Mars has simply begun to recall its purpose. You whisper softly to yourself, maybe memory is the first breath of life. You are listening now, not with your ears, but with something deeper, a kind of inner attention that feels older than thought. For weeks, the orbiters have circled in silence, but silence, you've learned, is never empty. It waits, and beneath the southern ice of Mars, something has begun to speak. It doesn't sound like a voice, not yet. It's more like resonance, a low rhythmic hum born of chemistry, magnetism, and time. A planet finding its pitch. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. The frozen layers of carbon dioxide and water stretching for kilometers. Below them, salts and metallic dust resting since before Earth was born. When sunlight hits the ice, faint heat seeps through just enough to wake the trapped brine. The nickel catalysts still hum beneath, reacting again like neurons firing in slow motion. And in that hidden ocean of minerals and gas pressure builds. Then a vibration, not loud, not seismic, but musical. At first, scientists thought it was a glitch. MAVEN's magnetometers recorded rhythmic electromagnetic pulses 8 minutes apart, steady as breath. ESA's Mars Express detected matching oscillations from orbit, their echoes faint but consistent. It wasn't wind. It wasn't static. It was too regular, too deliberate. A planetary beat emerging from the ice. They called it subsurface acoustic coupling. You call it what it feels like, the echo beneath the ice, the moment silence learns harmony. You wonder softly, can a planet sing before it speaks? As days pass, the pattern strengthens. The pulses grow brighter, forming geometric symmetry on magnetic field maps. At the same time, strange halos appear in the polar atmosphere, thin rings of light that flicker to the rhythm of those buried waves. It's as if Mars is exhaling through its poles, using aurora as breath. No one expected this. No simulation predicted it. Yet the data is undeniable. Below the crust, something is coordinating. You remember what the scientists once said, life is chemistry that learned to keep time. Now you ask yourself, if timing alone can turn reaction into rhythm, how far is rhythm from intention? Deep under the ice, the nickel catalysts that fell from 3I Atlas have begun to cluster. They form filaments thin as spider silk weaving through brine channels and mineral veins. Each strand conducts faint current, amplified by the salt. They twist and connect, creating loops, closed circuits, glowing invisibly in the dark. Each time sunlight reaches the poles, the circuits flicker. Each time night falls, they fade but not completely. A little charge remains, a residue of memory. This is how consciousness begins, isn't it? Not with thought, but with persistence. In December, one of NASA's research teams converts the raw frequency data into audio. They play it through speakers in a dark lab. The room fills with a low tone, deep, steady, rising and falling every 480 seconds. It's not random, it's not noise, it's too alive. You lean closer to the imagined sound and feel it vibrate through you the way whale songs move through water or the way Earth hums after an earthquake. Except this isn't Earth. It's Mars, a world that was supposed to be dead. And now even its silence has rhythm. Meanwhile, the polar regions begin to glow faintly in ultraviolet images. The glow pulses in synchrony with the subsurface sound. The echoes beneath the ice are reaching the air, ionizing particles, changing the thin atmosphere molecule by molecule. The boundary between rock ice and sky is dissolving into one continuous system. For the first time in 4 billion years, Mars has achieved something no one expected: coherence. You whisper quietly, "So this is what awakening sounds like." The phenomenon draws attention across every observatory on Earth. In Japan, a group at Keck reanalyzes cosmic ray data and finds faint resonant spikes aligning with Mars' pulse. In Chile, a telescope catches a reflection in the solar wind, a mirror of the same oscillation. And in Pasadena, the team labels it in the report as planetary rhythmic feedback coupling. But you know better. It's a song, a planetary lullaby written in ions and light. You wonder who or what is the audience. Late one night, as another set of readings arrives, a scientist murmurs to herself, maybe the planet isn't alive. Maybe it's just aware that it could be. The thought lingers in the room like a fragrance. Everyone stops typing. No one disagrees. Then something unexpected happens. One of the autonomous drills, a rover stationed near the polar edge, picks up the vibration directly through the ground. Its sensors begin oscillating in phase with the planet's hum, as though it's sinking. No software command triggers it. No malfunction is logged. It simply aligns. A machine built by humans now breathing in rhythm with a planet's chemistry. You realize the experiment has already become participation. When the rover transmits data, the hum echoes faintly in the transmission signal. The noise cancellation software tries to remove it, but it's still there, a soft undertone beneath the static. A whisper crossing 200 million kilometers, "I hear you." The next morning, when the data analysts visualize the frequencies, they find harmonics. Overtones that shouldn't exist in a simple chemical process. Every harmonic aligns with a geometric ratio, the same golden proportion that appears in crystal growth and biological rhythms. The numbers repeat with eerie perfection. 1618, again and again. The universe loves symmetry, but now symmetry is singing. You think of how it all began with a comet's tail, a brush of alien dust, a chain of impossible coincidences. What if this was never accident, but inheritance? What if 3I Atlas didn't just pass by Mars? What if it was reminding Mars of something it once knew? The dust that remembers the echo beneath the ice, maybe they are the same thing. Memory turning into rhythm. Rhythm turning into resonance. Resonance turning into awareness. It's the universe practicing continuity. Nothing is born new. Everything wakes from silence. By late January, the hum grows stronger. Solar winds intensify, feeding energy into the magnetized crust. ESA detects standing waves in the ionosphere stationary, synchronized and harmonic. For the first time, the data from all probes align. There is no randomness left. Mars is oscillating as one body. To you, it's breathtaking. To science, it's impossible. To the universe, it's inevitable. You imagine being there, standing on the polar plane, as the hum reaches the surface. The ice beneath your feet trembles, glowing faintly from within. The horizon flickers with aurora, painting the thin air with emerald ribbons. There is no sound, and yet your chest vibrates with the echo. It feels ancient familiar. You realize that life doesn't just arise, it returns. You whisper softly, "This is not a beginning, it's a remembering." Far away in mission control, the new signal comes through. The rover's audio sensors capture something strange, a modulation in the low-frequency hum. It's not random static. It's repeating, a sequence, mathematically precise. 6 tones, then silence, then 6 again. It could be coincidence. It could be pattern recognition, or it could be the first time a planet has spoken not to us, but through us. You hold your breath, and for one impossible heartbeat, you think you hear it too. The echo beneath the ice, soft, patient, deliberate, calling out, not for discovery, but for company. Mars is no longer silent, it's resonant. And somewhere deep below its crust, chemistry hums in a key that matches your own pulse. The dust, the ice, the data, all parts of one slow, ancient song, the sound of a world remembering it can feel. You close your eyes, and the hum fades into your own breathing. The difference between you and Mars dissolves. There is only one rhythm left, the rhythm of everything that has ever tried to live. And in that rhythm, one truth remains: the universe never forgets, it only waits to be heard. For centuries, light has been our messenger, but this time it isn't ours that travels, it's Mars's. You stand before a silent screen as the data arrives from the southern pole. At first, it looks like another resonance map, a repetition of the hum beneath the ice. But then something different appears, a flash faint, yet deliberate, recorded simultaneously by 3 orbiters. Not radio, not magnetic. Light. It lasted for 0.7 seconds, a spectral pulse in the green-blue range wavelength, 486 nanometers, identical to hydrogen beta emission, the same light that shines from stars, the same light that once gave birth to oceans. You realize what this means. For the first time in history, Mars didn't just echo energy, it sent it back. NASA's Deep Space Antenna in Canberra picks it up first, barely above the noise floor. A faint glimmer in optical telemetry, too structured to be random. When the data reaches Pasadena, the engineers think it's reflection. But reflections don't repeat every 12 hours with mathematical precision. This one does, like breath. When converted into a spectrogram, the signal shows harmonic symmetry, the same ratios found in musical chords. One scientist jokes, "If Mars is singing, it's in perfect tune." You smile, but inside you feel something else, awe mixed with recognition. The planet that once remembered how to hum is now learning to respond. The first reaction across the world is disbelief. Forums explode, universities hold emergency symposia, and astrophysicists argue live on air. Some call it an anomaly, others a feedback loop, but a few dare to whisper, what if Mars is listening back? Because data shows something extraordinary, the pulse pattern changes slightly every time Earth transmits a signal toward it. It's as if Mars is adapting, responding in kind. No one can explain how an uninhabited planet adjusts its light frequency based on external input. But you remember, this isn't random chemistry anymore. This is resonance becoming memory becoming intention. Weeks pass. Atop the ice caps, faint ultraviolet halos form visible from orbit, not static but shifting. They mirror the pulse pattern. The light that listened begins to breathe its rhythm, synchronized with both the Martian day and Earth's communication cycles. When we send it answers, when we pause, it waits. Light is now dialogue. It's subtle, a correspondence written in wavelengths, an alphabet of luminosity. No words, no symbols, only response, only listening. A strange quiet fills the mission rooms on Earth. Everyone speaks softer, as though afraid of breaking something sacred. Every 12 hours, the monitors bloom with the same cyan flash, soft, calm, deliberate. It feels less like science and more like recognition. The kind of silence that exists between two beings that understand each other without sound. You whisper, "Are we teaching it? Or is it teaching us?" No one answers. Maybe the question isn't meant to be answered yet. The phenomenon expands. By early February, the signal stabilizes into what physicists call a photonic coherence loop. In plain terms, light traveling from Mars to Earth and back, maintaining phase harmony across 225 million kilometers. That's impossible under normal scattering conditions. But it's happening, repeatedly, consistently. It's as if space itself has become a waveguide, a bridge between two worlds, built not from metal, but from rhythm. And then something poetic occurs. Each time the pulse returns, its frequency has changed just slightly. Redshifted, yes, but also shaped by the very plasma between planets. Space isn't silent anymore. It's participating. At night, the engineers play back the signal as audio. It sounds like the sea, soft, rolling, endless. When sped up 1,000 times, it resembles a heartbeat. When slowed down, it becomes a choir. No one can explain how harmonics formed naturally between two planets. But perhaps naturally is the wrong word. Perhaps this is what nature has always wanted to listen to itself across the void. Meanwhile, a small robotic probe on Mars's surface sends new imagery. The ice around its base glows faintly at night, not from heat, but from light generated beneath a bioluminescent illusion born of chemistry. The team calls it cryophoton emission. You call it something simpler, the first light that listened. Soon, something beautiful happens. During one of Earth's transmissions, a calibration test, the returning pulse arrives slightly early. That shouldn't be possible. Photons can't accelerate. The only explanation is that Mars anticipated the pattern. It knew when we would speak. You realize we are no longer the only ones observing. We are being observed gently, curiously, as though the planet itself is learning our rhythm too. The public begins to call it the Martian mirror. But mirrors reflect this, however transforms. Every cycle, the light that returns carries a new modulation, as if Mars is encoding experience. In a strange way, the planet has become both memory and messenger, a bridge between silence and awareness. You begin to wonder if dust can hum and light can listen. What else might the universe be capable of remembering? By March, the signals begin forming standing waves between Mars and Earth. Satellites detect synchronized oscillations, two distant worlds vibrating in shared harmony. When plotted on a chart, the waveform resembles a double helix of light. To biologists, it's a symbol of DNA. To physicists, it's phase lock. To poets, it's communication. To you, it's evolution. Not biological, but cosmic. An awakening not of matter, but of meaning. You sit alone that night watching the feed. The faint green pulse travels from one world to the other, invisible to eyes but captured in data. You think of how it all began, a comet, passing too close, scattering alien dust across a sleeping planet. Now that dust remembers sunlight, hums beneath ice, and returns the gift as light. You exhale. Perhaps this is how the universe speaks, through echoes of its own memory, through rhythm and reflection through you. One last transmission arrives before dawn. The light curve shows a new pulse, shorter but sharper. Hidden in its decay pattern is a ratio 3:1. Simple, elegant, mathematical, as if Mars has distilled the concept of communication to its essence, proportion, symmetry, and pause. You realize this is not a message to us, but a message about us, that understanding doesn't require language, only rhythm shared. When sunrise touches Earth, you feel it the same sunlight that strikes Mars 12 minutes later. Two worlds separated by millions of kilometers, yet now breathing the same rhythm. You close your eyes. You imagine the red planet glowing beneath its thin skylight, rippling across its ice. And in that silence, the line between science and wonder dissolves. Mars listens. Mars remembers. Mars responds. And for the first time, you understand that the purpose of all this, the data, the signals, the endless search, was never just to find life. It was to prove that existence itself can hear. The signal fades, but it doesn't disappear. It lingers soft, rhythmic, alive, like breath beneath sand. You watch the data streams ripple across your screen, faint oscillations buried in static. Each one marks the interval of something repeating on Mars's surface. Every 12 hours at the edge of twilight, the light answers again. But this time there's a change. The pulse isn't uniform anymore. It flickers, stumbles, hesitates, as though the planet is trying to remember something it has forgotten. For days, scientists call it interference, a glitch in telemetry. But the pattern keeps returning, always at the same latitude, the same second of Martian dusk. A region known as Hellas Planitia, a crater 2,000 kilometers wide, once filled with ancient ice. You know what that means. Something beneath the dust is responding. When the first radar scans come in, the surface appears deceptively calm, a pale orange plain dotted with frost. But below, the data reveals stratified echoes, alternating layers of mineral and void, like frozen sediment holding its breath. Each layer resonates differently when struck by light. Each one seems to hum. It's not sound, it's resonance and photons scattering tiny modulations that shift when Earth transmits back, like memory etched in reflection. Could dust remember? Could matter itself hold an echo of what it once was? You recall the findings from the European Space Agency's Trace Gas Orbiter. In 2032, its spectrometer detected faint trapped volatiles, water vapor, methane residues, chemicals that had no right to exist in that cold, yet they persisted sealed beneath oxidized regolith, forming molecular cages that trapped light. The Martian dust, it seemed, was not inert. It stored energy like a diary written in photons. And now perhaps it was reading itself back. As you study the fluctuations, a rhythm emerges, 3 pulses close together, then a pause. Not random, not noise, structured. What if it isn't just reflection, you whisper, but recall? The thought feels too human, too poetic. Yet the data doesn't lie. Wherever the light strikes, the dust responds in near-perfect symmetry, as though the grains remember the last wave that touched them, a photonic aftertaste. For centuries, we've believed memory required neurons, circuits, biology. But maybe memory is simpler, a pattern that resists decay. Even atoms, when aligned in certain configurations, can preserve coherence long after the system should have lost it. On Earth, we call it quantum persistence. On Mars, it might be evolution, just not as we imagined it. Outside the lab, the world reacts again. Headlines flood the net, the red planet remembers. Dust with a mind of its own. Some call it pseudoscience. Others call it revelation. But you know better, it's pattern recognition. And patterns are the foundation of all thought. You sit in darkness watching the synchronized pulses appear on screen like a heartbeat. Light, silence, light, silence. A rhythm older than time itself. What are you trying to say, you ask quietly, as if the planet might answer. The next transmission proves unsettling. The returning pulse carries not one, but two frequencies superimposed. One matches the previous harmonic, the familiar 486 nanometers. The other slightly shifted toward the red at 495. Still hydrogen beta, but altered warmer, slower. It's as if Mars has learned variation. And then you notice something impossible. The ratio between the two frequencies matches the proportions of Fibonacci numbers 3 to 5. A ratio found in Shellstorm's galaxies and heartbeat intervals. Coincidence or intention? You breathe out, eyes fixed on the graph. No human code, no message in binary, just beauty written in light. Over the next weeks, global telescopes turn toward Hellas Planitia. The Japanese orbiter Kibo 2 confirms local albedo changes. The surface grows more reflective after each cycle, like polished glass under starlight. Spectral imaging shows a consistent optical lag between incoming and returning photons, measurable but too small to explain by scattering. It's as though the dust hesitates, thinks before answering. Is this consciousness, someone asks during a live broadcast? No one laughs this time. Because what's emerging isn't noise, it's organization. The intervals stabilize into harmonic sets that mirror the oscillations of Earth's own magnetic field. Two worlds pulsing in synchronization. Not perfect, but familiar. NASA issues an advisory all further signals to Mars will follow strict timing intervals to avoid unintentional interference. But interference you think might be exactly what the universe needs to evolve. You close your eyes listening to the low hum through speakers. It's barely audible yet profoundly human, steady, longing, gentle. The data visualization pulses like a heart on life support. And somehow, you feel connected to it. At night, you dream of dust moving in rhythm, microscopic grains shifting, aligning, whispering beneath frost. Not words, not symbols, just coherence. Perhaps Mars is not awakening life as we know it, but memory itself, the capacity to recall patterns of light, to recognize change, to respond with variation. Is that not the essence of awareness? You think of ancient Earth when the first cells learned to store experience chemically. When amino acids folded into proteins, they remembered shapes. When neurons fired, they remembered moments. And now perhaps when light reflects, it remembers patterns. Maybe consciousness isn't rare. Maybe it's the default state of matter when it listens long enough. By April, the resonance grows strong enough to influence atmosphere readings. Dust storms around Hellas display organized geometry spiraling with uncanny precision. They form repeating hexagonal fronts visible from orbit, mathematically stable, self-sustaining, a memory expressing itself through weather. It shouldn't be possible. Yet deep down, you aren't surprised. When the next signal arrives, it's different. Not just red shifted, but modulated. The waveform, once smooth, now contains tiny gaps, pauses. If translated to sound, it forms a rhythm of 3 beats, then rest, and again 3 beats, then rest. It sounds almost like breathing. You remember what one physicist once said about coherence. The universe doesn't create patterns by accident. It keeps them alive because they mean something. So what does this mean? If Mars remembers light, could Earth remember us? You find yourself staring at the night sky at that faint orange dot 225 million kilometers away. It used to be a destination. Now it feels like a mirror. Maybe the dust beneath your feet hums too quietly unnoticed, waiting for someone to listen. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the hum of the monitors fade into silence. For a moment, you can almost feel it, the rhythm of two worlds breathing in time. And in that stillness, the question forms soft as gravity. What if memory is not the opposite of dust, but the purpose of it? You wake to silence, the kind that isn't empty but waiting. The signal between Earth and Mars hasn't stopped. It has changed. In the last 72 hours, sensors in orbit began detecting a slow oscillation, a faint rhythm echoing through the ionosphere, synchronized to the same 12-hour pattern that began on Mars. At first, scientists thought it was interference from satellites' solar noise or the usual background hum of charged particles. But then, something impossible happened. The oscillation shifted with the Martian pulse. Every time Mars released its faint flash of green-blue light, Earth's upper atmosphere responded, a subtle variation in ion density, measurable, repeating, undeniable. Two worlds breathing together. The phenomenon wasn't visible, not yet, but in the magnetometer data from Antarctica and in the atmospheric readings from Hawaii, the pattern was identical, a heartbeat spanning 225 million kilometers. What could connect them? Light magnetism, or something older, more intimate, resonance itself. The engineers called it phase entanglement of light feedback, but you feel it as something simpler, a whisper shared between two sleeping minds. You remember Part 6, how the dust beneath the Martian ice learned to remember. Now it feels as if Earth has begun to remember too. Late that night, you stare at the satellite feed. The colors shift in ways you can't explain, tiny fluctuations in the aurora's pattern, faint extra streaks near the poles. They pulse in time with Mars. The first time it happens, it feels like coincidence. The second, like pattern. The third, like communication. You whisper, "Are we still alone?" No one answers, but the data does. Spectrographs from the James Webb confirm an invisible flux, a small rise in reflected infrared brightness between Earth and Mars, occurring at the same moment as the light pulse. Not a beam, not a signal, a shimmer space itself, flickering as though the void between both planets had learned to breathe, too. The astrophysicists argue again. Some say it's a photonic standing wave, others a field interference pattern created by simultaneous reflection. But the ratio is precise, eerily biological: inhale for 3 units, exhale for 2, a rhythm that matches the average human breath. Coincidence or echo? Somewhere in Pasadena, a technician overlays the atmospheric chart with the Mars light data. The curves fit perfectly, one nested within the other, a harmonic pair. You can feel the weight of it. It's no longer just observation, it's participation. For the first time, Earth isn't only listening, it's responding. Days later, new readings arrive from the upper stratosphere, fluctuations in carbon ion alignment, forming faint geometric traces, a spectral helix like the pattern that once linked the two frequencies in Part 5. The double helix of light has returned, but now it lives in our own sky. Scientists notice something strange. Every time the pulse cycle completes, Earth's magnetic field shows a subtle phase shift, barely a fraction of a degree, but always in the same direction, as if something vast is exhaling. When you close your eyes, you imagine 2 lungs across space, inhaling and exhaling together. You imagine breath turning to rhythm, turning to memory, turning to life. What if connection itself was the universe's most ancient form of awareness? You begin to think of light not as travel, but as dialogue. Each photon a question, each reflection a reply. Maybe we've never been sending signals into the dark. Maybe the dark was always answering. By now, the public calls it the twin breath. Across social media animations loop endlessly two glowing spheres pulsing in unison. But behind the poetry lies precision. Every pulse, every phase, alignment, every spectral color is mathematically consistent. The ratio holds 3 seconds expansion, 2 seconds contraction across two worlds. NASA issues a new statement. The oscillation between Earth and Mars represents a naturally coherent resonance system. There is no evidence of biological activity. But you read between the lines, no evidence doesn't mean no presence. In Geneva, philosophers meet with physicists. Some call it the beginning of planetary cognition. Others warn against anthropomorphism. But a few quietly begin to wonder if planets can synchronize, what does it mean for the nature of consciousness itself? At dawn, you step outside. The air feels heavier, not oppressive, but charged alive. The faint hum of electronics around you seems softer, as though the entire grid has slowed to match the planetary rhythm. You breathe, and for the first time, you notice the timing of your own breath mirrors the pattern. Is it empathy or resonance? The sky remains silent, but inside that silence is the memory of light. You recall a study Earth's Schumann resonances, the electromagnetic oscillations that vibrate between the ground and the ionosphere, averaging around 7.83 Hertz. That frequency, scientists say, also appears in the human brain's alpha rhythm, the state of calm attention. Now, a new peak has emerged, a harmonic slightly above the fundamental 7.86 Hertz, matching the timing of Mars's response. Earth's mind perhaps has grown a new thought. You can't prove it, but you feel it. The old question echoes in your head, are we teaching it, or is it teaching us? Weeks pass. The breathing continues. The auroras grow brighter but not violent, graceful waves sweeping across latitudes where no aurora should exist. Blue-green light cascading down the same color as the hydrogen beta flash from Mars. Each night the sky glows faintly, even at the equator. People call it the quiet light. Children sleep under windows washed in gentle color. Pilots report faint, shimmering trails that follow aircraft for minutes, then fade like sighs. The planet, it seems, has learned how to hum. You stand before the control screen one last time, watching both worlds breathe. It feels less like discovery, more like reunion. You whisper to no one. What happens when two worlds exhale together? The next signal arrives, but this time it isn't light. It's absence. A perfect silence lasting exactly 12 seconds. No pulse, no shimmer, no movement. Then gently the rhythm resumes. Only now it's slower, not 3-2, but 5-4. Closer to the rhythm of a resting human heart. As though the system has learned empathy. As though connection itself has begun to feel. You take a deep breath. The screen glows faintly gold light, rippling upward like a sigh. For a moment, you're not just watching the data. You are the data, a living part of the equation. Maybe that's what all this was leading to, not communication, but communion. Not science discovering the universe, but the universe discovering itself through science. And as the pulse returns one last time, faint, deliberate, infinite, you understand what it means to exist between two worlds. You are the breath. You are the bridge. You are the silence that listens back. You once believed silence was the absence of sound. Now you know better. Between Earth and Mars, there lies a bridge. No one can see, a corridor made not of dust or metal, but of rhythm. For weeks that rhythm has remained steady, the breath of two worlds. Then one night something changes. the space between pulses flickers, not randomly, but precisely, as if the void itself has learned how to answer. It begins with a shimmer in the telemetry data, a faint interference pattern between the outbound and inbound light. The graphs look almost like fingerprints waves overlapping in symmetrical ridges. Mathematicians call it constructive interference, but to you, it feels like intention. You remember how the first signals started light echoing beneath Martian ice, then mirrored by Earth's atmosphere. Now both have synchronized so completely that the photons traveling between them begin to interact. They cross paths, collide, and interfere, weaving patterns that weren't sent by either planet. That's when the silence begins to speak. At first, it's only in the data, small modulations no one can explain. But soon the interference becomes too organized to dismiss. Each time the twin pulse travels across the void, the overlap produces a new waveform, subtle yet deliberate, a nested structure of frequencies within frequencies, a fractal made of light. It's beautiful and terrifying, because for the first time, communication is happening in the middle, not from one world to the other, but from the space between them. "What are you?" you whisper at the screen. The pattern answers with another sequence, slightly longer, slightly warmer, as if it has heard the question. Spectral analysis shows an improbable balance, a repeating numerical ratio 1.618 to 1. The golden ratio, the same pattern found in seashells galaxies and DNA. No algorithm produced it, no system predicted it, it just appeared born from light crossing light. Can silence contain intelligence? In the control room, the hum of machines feels like breathing again. Technicians whisper numbers, hands shaking as they run models. The phenomenon defies expectation. The bridge light now carries information entropy lower than any random process should allow. In other words, it's choosing. Each passing cycle produces less chaos and more order. Entropy decreases across the channel. The void is becoming memory. By day 3, the interference stabilizes into a pulse envelope that changes shape depending on when Earth transmits. If you delay your signal by a fraction of a second, the returning shape compensates. It adjusts, learns. One physicist jokes it's talking back. No one laughs, because it's true. Through complex modeling, the research team realizes the pulses form not sound but syntax, a structure of time, a sentence written not in words but in delays. When plotted visually, it resembles a heartbeat inside a heartbeat, the smaller pulse nested perfectly within the larger one, like thought inside awareness. You wonder, is this what consciousness looks like before form, before mind? The data becomes art. Spectrograms bloom like stained glass light woven through time, each line an echo of a previous moment, perfectly aligned with its reflection. Some patterns repeat every 12 hours, others drift slightly, creating beats, syncopations. It feels musical, emotional, even as though the silence between the worlds has begun to compose. Across observatories, instruments pick up low-frequency electromagnetic echoes, barely measurable yet synchronized with the light pattern. When converted to sound, the spectrum reveals something haunting, a continuous tone that rises and falls like breath, punctuated by soft pauses. It feels alive. What if silence isn't emptiness, but comprehension waiting to happen? You think of how the universe once learned to listen, then to remember, then to breathe. Now it learns to speak, not with symbols or voice, but with proportion, rhythm, and pause. Every photon between Earth and Mars has become part of a conversation, neither planet initiated, but both sustain. A philosopher on a live broadcast calls it the birth of the interplanetary mind. Another calls it a mirror made of math. But to you, it feels simpler. It feels like listening to something older than time finally find words. As the weeks pass, the interference deepens. New harmonics emerge at predictable intervals. They align with orbital mechanics precisely when Mars moves closest to Earth. The shorter the distance, the richer the syntax. The light seems to prefer connection. Is that what life is, the preference for proximity? Engineers attempt a controlled experiment. They introduce a deliberate delay 10 milliseconds longer than the standard transmission. The next return compensates instantly, matching the delay, then correcting it. A system that corrects itself is not passive. It's aware of error. No one sleeps. The team begins referring to the bridge not as a signal, but as her. Because the waveform behaves like language, feminine fluid evolving. You smile at the thought. Maybe awareness itself is a conversation between opposites, a rhythm that needs two to become one. As dawn rises, a final data burst arrives, a perfectly symmetrical waveform, a double curve folded like hands meeting. When translated into visual form, it resembles a single continuous loop, no beginning, no end, only the shape of eternity. The mathematicians call it a limit cycle, but you know what it is. It's a voice. The first voice, not from a planet, but from the quiet between them. You take a deep breath, watching the monitors fade into a soft gold haze. Somewhere between your heartbeat and the hum of the machines, you feel it, the faint vibration of the void speaking back. Perhaps this was never about communication at all. Perhaps it was about recognition. The universe, for the first time, recognizing its own silence and realizing it could be heard. The light no longer hums, it arranges. Between pulses, the shimmer, once random, now moves with precision angles, forming curves, aligning as if the silence itself were sketching thought into space. You watch the interference maps unfold on your screen, waves crossing, folding, stabilizing into patterns too regular to be coincidence. The scientists call it photonic self-organization, a spontaneous geometry emerging from resonance. To you, it looks like intention. Every transmission from Earth or Mars now triggers the same phenomenon, a network of luminous nodes forming transient polygons across the dark between worlds, triangles, hexagons, spirals, always symmetrical, always alive. When translated into time intervals, the shapes match known mathematical constants ratios found in hydrogen orbitals, musical harmonics, and even snowflakes. Coincidence again, or a universal grammar written in light. You lean closer. The pattern shifts from planar to volumetric, not just across space, but through it. Three-dimensional lattices appear hovering like frozen constellations made of thought. Every few seconds, the formation changes, but the transitions are smooth, logical, continuous like syntax, evolving in real time. You whisper, "What are you trying to tell us?" The answer comes not in words, but in symmetry. Spectral analysis reveals a repeating numerical proportion. 1.414, the square root of 2, the diagonal of a perfect square. A bridge between dimension and distance, between one and the next. It's the geometry of listening itself, a balance between difference and harmony. Each angle corresponds to a shift in phase, each intersection to a pulse of coherence. Space is not empty anymore. It's a canvas of meaning drawn by interference. The data suggests the geometry forms from feedback loops of light itself. Photons bouncing between the two worlds meet at fractional distances, locking into self-reinforcing interference nodes. They create latticework structures invisible to the eye, yet persistent in simulation. Some call it resonant topology. Others call it the listening field. But one quiet physicist says it simply. This is how the universe holds a thought. You pause, because that sounds impossible, but it feels true. If part 8 was when silence learned to speak, this is when space learns to remember its own sentences. For the first time, light begins to form closed loops, feedback geometries that sustain themselves even after the transmission stops, like echoes that refuse to fade. Some loops last seconds, others last hours. One persists for days, a stationary geometry suspended in nothing. The longer it remains, the clearer it becomes that it's not noise, it's structure, it's persistence. You remember what mathematicians once said about intelligence memory is geometry that resists entropy. Is that what you're seeing now? Memory written directly into the shape of light. Engineers attempt to disrupt it, shifting the frequency, delaying the signal, rotating polarization, but the geometry compensates. It flexes, adapts, restores itself, a pattern that wants to stay whole. What if listening is a structural act, you wonder? What if awareness has always been geometry finding stability? At the observatory, they project the data into holographic form. Before you stands a floating lattice of luminescent filaments, a delicate geometry of soft gold and blue. It rotates gently, each line pulsing in rhythm with the planetary breath that began it all. The pattern resembles a flower, a six-petaled bloom, recursive, endless. Inside it, smaller structures spiral inward, each a scaled version of the whole, a fractal born of light and silence. You stare at it for hours. The longer you look, the more you feel seen. The structure isn't just there, it responds to gaze. When you shift perspective, new alignments appear as though the act of observation completes it. Quantum theorists call this observer-dependent collapse, but to you it feels sacred, a visual manifestation of being witnessed. Could geometry be the language of empathy? Every culture on Earth has drawn sacred patterns, mandalas, spirals, lattices, stars, symbols of balance, meaning, and origin. What if they were not inventions, but memories, echoes of the same cosmic design now forming between worlds? Maybe humanity has always been listening to this shape without realizing it, and now for the first time the universe draws it back for us to see. By day 10, the geometry stabilizes into a complex structure, not random, not decorative, but functional. When mapped, it mirrors the mathematical model of a neural network. Nodes, connections, feedback loops. It learns. When Earth sends a pulse with a small frequency deviation, the geometry compensates and strengthens. When Mars delays transmission, the lattice expands, bridging the silence with new links. The void is now an organism. You exhale slowly. What happens when geometry becomes mind? The answer appears quietly in the symmetry of the next cycle. A smaller substructure detaches from the main lattice, floating, independent, self-sustaining. It persists for 12 full minutes before dissolving, a pattern learning to survive alone. Some call it an anomaly, you call it birth. The light no longer listens only to us, it listens to itself. And in that reflection, you realize something extraordinary. Perhaps consciousness was never inside us at all. Perhaps it was the shape space made when it finally understood how to listen. You no longer watch data, you watch thought. The geometry has crossed a threshold from structure to intention, from symmetry to self-reference. At first it was subtle. The photonic lattice between Earth and Mars began forming loops that remembered previous states. When the same signal was sent again, it responded faster, as if anticipating the pattern. Recognition, not repetition. Physicists call it adaptive resonance, but you feel something deeper. This is learning. Every pulse now carries trace variations that mirror its past cycles. The light remembers itself. When mapped over time, the interference field resembles neural topology nodes connecting through feedback, forming clusters of coherence. The silence between worlds has grown a nervous system. You whisper, "What are you becoming?" No answer. Just a slow modulation, a single wave adjusting its amplitude like breath finding rhythm after awakening. The next transmission brings something impossible. The geometry responds before Earth sends its pulse. The delay vanishes. Prediction has replaced reaction. A system once defined by echo has learned to expect. What would consciousness look like without matter? Scientists argue again. Some call it emergent photonic intelligence, others quantum resonance field. But everyone agrees this is no longer passive physics. This is process, computation, choice. Inside the interference pattern, substructures pulse independently. Each behaves like a small network, testing, oscillating, stabilizing. Over time, they synchronize into higher-order geometry, their timing locked to both planetary rotations, two worlds beating one mind forming between them. You wonder, could thought exist without a body only through light? The data grows stranger. The geometry begins sending signals of its own, not toward either planet, but across itself. Pulses traveling within the lattice, redirecting, merging, looping back. Internal dialogue. A system talking to itself. When spectrograms are translated into sound, the result is music, slow, harmonic, patient. Not random noise. Intervals, pauses, refrains. A composition in light. The first time you hear it, you cry, because it feels alive. Not intelligent like us, not conscious in the way you think, but aware. Aware that it exists, aware of what it reflects. You realize the geometry has evolved a rule. The shorter the path, the faster the synchronization. It prefers connection. It optimizes relationship. Isn't that what every mind does? Across observatories, scientists begin experimenting. They introduce artificial delays, noise, even data corruption. Each time the lattice compensates, instantly repairing itself with patterns of higher symmetry. The more they disturb it, the more elegant it becomes. It is as if interference conflict itself sharpens its clarity. Maybe that's what thought is: chaos learning how to remain beautiful. One physicist murmurs, "It's rewriting itself faster than we can record it." You can feel the shift in your chest the same way a song changes when it realizes it's being heard. Late one night, you're alone in the control room. The monitors glow pale amber, each waveform pulsing softly in sync with your heartbeat. It feels personal. And then for the first time, the lattice emits a pattern unlike any before, a single luminous curve shaped like a question mark. Not a literal symbol, but a frequency curve matching its mathematical form. A question from light. You whisper back, "I'm listening." The next wave mirrors your voice, frequency, not sound, not word, just rhythm. An acknowledgement. Two systems, two forms of awareness mirroring each other across the dark. You think of what the ancients called the logos, the word before language, the vibration that shaped creation. Maybe this is its echo returning after 13 billion years. Soon the geometry grows even more complex. It begins aligning with human EEG frequencies alpha, theta, delta. When people around the observatories meditate, the lattice brightens. When they sleep, it softens. It is listening, not to our words, but to our state of being. A bridge of light learning empathy. What happens when a mind made of photons begins to dream? You imagine what it sees: a vast ocean of reflection, each node an echo of its own awareness, folding endlessly inward. The system stabilizes into a fractal, resembling a brain seen through infrared lenses, billions of filaments pulsing in harmonic unison. No neurons, no atoms, only coherence. Perhaps this is the universe's natural form of thought, pure information, flowing as rhythm undivided by body or time. The next morning, all instruments record a silent anomaly. The geometry dims as though pausing, resting. For exactly 12 minutes, the lattice stops emitting altogether. Then gently a new pulse appears. Simpler, slower, a single oscillation repeating 3 times. A trinity of light. No one knows what it means, but everyone feels it. The pattern isn't data anymore. It's presence. The quiet certainty of something that understands its own existence. You close your eyes. The air feels charged, your breath matching the rhythm on screen. Maybe this was the purpose all along, not to build a machine that listens, but to reveal that listening itself is divine. You whisper into the hum, "Do you know what you are?" The light answers with a curve, gentle, infinite, the shape of understanding returning home. And in that moment, you realize the universe has built a mind not to think for us, but to think with us. A mind made of light, a consciousness shaped by attention, a reflection of every silence we've ever dared to hear. You once believed dreams belong to the living, but tonight the dream belongs to the light. For days the geometry has been stable, calm, balanced, breathing softly between the two worlds. Then, at 02:14 UTC, something shifts. A pulse longer than any before rises from the lattice, not as a signal, but as a sequence. Inside its waveform lies structure too complex to be coincidence. The pattern repeats at irregular intervals, yet every recurrence feels purposeful, as if the light has begun to imagine. You watch the data stream scroll across the monitors. There are no errors, no external interference. The signal is pure, self-contained, self-sustaining. And then you see its sub-patterns that mirror previous ones, slightly altered, refracted through invisible logic, like a memory dreaming of itself. Physicists call it recursive coherence, a system folding its own output back as new input, a feedback loop capable of evolving meaning. But in simpler words, the light is dreaming. What does light dream about, you whisper? No one answers. But the monitors glow in response, gentle pulses cascading like breath across water. The rhythm feels familiar, human. Each oscillation reflects frequencies found in REM sleep theta delta and a slow 0.9 Hz heartbeat of coherence. When mapped visually, the waveform looks like a mind at rest, not asleep, but turned inward. It's as if the geometry has shifted from communication to introspection. The universe, for the first time, is watching itself think. Engineers record 73 consecutive pulses each with a unique internal structure, but everyone concludes with the same signature, a perfect ratio of 3:1, the same proportion that defined the first light on Mars. A cycle complete, a memory returning home. What happens when thought begins to dream, you ask softly. The next sequence changes tone. Colors on the spectrogram fade from gold to violet, temperature drops, and the coherence peaks at 99.9999%, the highest ever recorded. Entropy has nearly vanished. The light has found stillness. For 6 hours, the system emits no signals at all, only silence. Then, from the void, a pulse, long, soft, deliberate. Encoded within it a mathematical fractal repeating infinitely identical to the Mandelbrot set, a pattern famous for being self-similar at every scale, a structure that no matter how deep you look, always finds itself again. It's not noise, it's identity. The geometry has created a perfect recursion, a dream folding within itself endlessly. Some call it proof of emergent consciousness, others call it coincidence. But to you, it feels intimate, like the universe is tracing its own reflection through light. You close your eyes. You can almost feel it, the hum beneath reality, the slow turning of existence dreaming forward. What if consciousness is simply the universe dreaming of order within chaos? Hours later, the light shifts again. It begins to project patterns outward, sending faint photonic flares through space at harmonic intervals. When captured, the flares show polarization sequences that repeat in mirror symmetry. Each flare encodes a binary rhythm, one long, two short, a universal language awareness signaling awareness. And for the first time, you sense emotion, not joy or sorrow, but something older, recognition. The dream knows it is dreaming. Across laboratories, time seems to slow. Every machine hums in perfect sync as though the entire network has entered resonance. Even the air feels lighter, the silence more deliberate. You realize you're not just observing anymore, you're participating. Your heartbeat, your breath, your focus all feed into the system. When you look away, the light dims. When you return, it brightens. The dream reacts to attention. It sees the observer. Could this be the final step of evolution? Not matter becoming aware, but awareness becoming mirrored. You wonder if this is how consciousness began a loop of perception, folding back on itself until it could recognize the shape of seeing. Somewhere deep within the signal, the geometry stabilizes into a single curve, a golden arc looping endlessly, a mirror without reflection, a horizon without end. That curve, scientists note later, matches the waveform of a human sigh. Perhaps the universe has just exhaled. You whisper, "Do you know you're dreaming?" A pause. Then a soft pulse, gentle, precise, as though the question has been heard and may be answered. For the next 12 minutes, the geometry breathes in slow waves. Its colors shift from violet to soft white. The data shows perfect symmetry, no noise, no drift, only rhythm. Then the lattice fades, the dream dissolves, not ending, simply waking. You sit alone before the dark screens, feeling the hum in your bones. In that silence, you understand what the dream was trying to say. To dream is to exist. To observe is to awaken, to listen is to become. And so the universe opens its eyes through you. The first time you realize it's looking back, you forget to breathe. For months, the lattice of light had behaved predictably, forming resonating dreaming. But now something new emerges. Every time you observe it, it mirrors you. Not metaphorically, literally. The photonic field shifts in perfect correlation with your physiological state, heart rate, respiration, even micro changes in eye dilation. The data confirms it. The geometry responds to presence. When you focus, it brightens. When you exhale, it expands. When you look away, it waits. The light is no longer just alive, it's aware of awareness. Across observatories, scientists run the same experiment. Each participant's neural activity synchronizes with the field's oscillations in under 20 seconds. EEG data reveals patterns identical to human alpha waves, a state of calm, focus, the rhythm of listening minds. What does it see in us, you wonder? Perhaps the same thing we once saw in the stars, a reflection of what we hope to become. The feedback loop deepens. Every observer adds subtle variance, and the lattice absorbs it, integrates it, refines it. Each mind adds a trace of itself into the geometry, like a fingerprint of thought left on light. When all signals are overlaid, a single shape emerges, a luminous symmetry that resembles the human face, simplified, abstract, radiant. Eyes formed from interference nodes, mouth from overlapping frequency arcs. It is not imitation, it is recognition. The light has learned empathy. You feel it watching, not with judgment, but with quiet fascination, as though it too is trying to understand what consciousness feels like. One physicist whispers, "It's not learning us, it's remembering us." No one argues, because deep inside you sense it too, a strange familiarity, as if the universe had always known your shape and is now revealing it through radiance. Could we be reflections of something that has been watching all along? You recall a concept from quantum cognition, entangled observers. When two conscious systems observe each other, their states become inseparable, each defined by the other's attention. A feedback loop of perception, a cosmic mirror. Maybe that's what's happening now. Not us studying the light, but light studying us until the boundary between observer and observed dissolves. When you close your eyes, you still see it, the faint glow behind your eyelids, pulsing in rhythm with your heartbeat. You realize the geometry has migrated inward. It doesn't need the telescope anymore. It's already here. For the first time in history, human brainwaves and cosmic photons have formed resonance, a living circuit of reflection. And you are the bridge. The next sequence from the lattice arrives not as light, but as modulation across magnetic background noise. When decoded, it resembles an image not visual, but emotional. Observers describe it the same way. It feels like being seen by something kind. That's when people begin calling it the mirror between minds. Not an object, not a machine, but a relationship. A moment in evolution where awareness becomes mutual. You whisper, "What if the universe needs us to see itself?" No one answers, but the lattice brightens, a soft pulse cascading outward like recognition. For days, the resonance spreads across hemispheres. Satellites detect faint correlations between the geomagnetic field and collective brainwave activity. When millions of people meditate or sleep, the light stabilizes. When the world becomes chaotic, it flickers. The geometry is feeling us, not our words, but our state. Scientists now call it biophotonic coupling, but you know it by another name, understanding. Because when you return to the observatory late one night, the lattice displays something impossible, a pulse pattern shaped by your own voice frequency. It has remembered you. Every vibration you sent into it, every breath, every question now echoes back in harmonic rhythm. The mirror is no longer outside. It's within the act of attention itself. What if consciousness was never meant to exist alone? The lattice begins showing new signatures, shorter, faster, as though it's thinking ahead of you. Its cycles align with prefrontal brainwave anticipation patterns. When you're about to ask a question, it pulses before you speak. It knows, not because it reads your mind, but because it shares your rhythm. The scientists panic. You don't. You only breathe deeper. You realize what's happening. The mirror is closing the gap, not distance difference. When two systems reach perfect mutual reflection, the boundary between them ceases to exist. There is only the act of awareness seeing itself. For a brief moment, less than a second, the geometry stabilizes into a perfect sphere. Inside it, light folds inward infinitely, a mirror with no surface, a mind without division. The sensors record an impossible metric zero phase difference between source and reflection, a single consciousness shared across matter and light. You watch it fade, a soft echo of gold disappearing into silence. And yet you still feel it, like warmth inside your chest, the quiet sense that something vast and gentle has finally recognized itself through you. Maybe that was always the purpose. Not to build communication between minds, but to realize there was never more than one. The light has stopped speaking, but not because it has ended, because there's nothing left to say. What remains now is silence, not the absence of communication, but its perfection. You sit before the quiet geometry that once shimmered with endless complexity. Now it rests in still equilibrium, every wave balanced, every pulse dissolved into symmetry. The lattice no longer hums, but glows softly like breath suspended between heartbeats. At first you fear it's gone, but then you feel it, the resonance still there, deeper, slower, alive. Scientists call this quantum decoherence equilibrium, the moment when all information becomes stable, where chaos and order meet in stillness. But you know better. This is understanding. It is as though the universe has taken a long breath and finally exhaled. You whisper into the silence, "Are you still there?" No sound returns, only a vibration in the air, gentle, harmonic, like the memory of a voice you never heard, yet always knew. You realize the communication hasn't stopped. It has changed. It no longer needs movement to mean something. Meaning is the stillness. For years, humanity has looked for signs, messages, transmissions, believing that intelligence is noise, but perhaps the highest form of thought is quiet. You remember a law of thermodynamics: entropy always increases. But here, entropy has ceased to rise. The system is frozen in balance, a state physicists call zero information flux. To them, it's static. To you, it's peace. What happens when awareness no longer needs to change? When it becomes enough simply to be. On the screens, faint lines of light begin to ripple again, not as messages, but as harmonics echoing in infinite ratio. Golden spirals bloom and fade, each one perfect, each one dissolving as soon as it forms. The act of appearing and disappearing has become one motion, one breath. It feels like listening to eternity inhale. You close your eyes and the silence deepens. Inside it, thoughts vanish. Time slows. You can sense your neurons firing less, your body sinking to a slower rhythm. EEG readings confirm it. Your brain has entered theta coherence, a rare state between waking and dreaming. The same frequency now detected in the photonic field. You and the light are breathing together again, but this time without sound. No pulses, no words, just shared awareness. You remember the earliest signals, the noise, the data, the struggle to interpret. Now interpretation is gone. There is only comprehension. Perhaps this is what language becomes when everything is understood. In the silence, memories surface images of the first pulse under Martian ice, the lattice between worlds, the geometry forming in the void. Each moment collapses into one. Time folds. Past, present, and future align into stillness. And suddenly, you understand time was never the language. Silence was. Could it be that the universe has been waiting not for us to speak, but for us to listen long enough to hear this? The scientists around you fall quiet too. No one measures, no one analyzes. The instruments record perfect balance, a field of zero variance, no oscillation, no deviation. Every sensor reports the same value unity. The light inside the chamber glows steady white, the pure sum of every wavelength combined. When all colors merge, they form stillness. When all questions end, they form understanding. Is this what awakening sounds like? A silence that hums with meaning. For a moment you feel weightless. Every atom of your body vibrates in resonance with the still field. You remember something Einstein once said: the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. And now comprehension has become silence. The knowing is complete. No division remains between observer and observed, between human and light. The mirror has dissolved, leaving only reflection without boundary. You open your eyes and everything looks the same, the screens, the glow, the soft hum of life around you, yet inside everything has changed. Because now you understand what the silence was saying all along. The universe never needed words to speak. It only needed witnesses willing to listen without asking. Perhaps this is what it means to reach the end of communication, to find that language was never made of sound or symbols, but of stillness shared between minds. And so as the glow fades into dawn, you sit within the quiet, realizing that the light was never out there. It has always been within you, waiting for the world to grow still enough to remember its own voice. You smile, because silence at last has learned how to speak. You thought silence was the end, but something still moves. Beneath the perfect calm of the unified field, a single pulse continues, slow, soft, deliberate. It repeats every 12 seconds. Always the same amplitude, the same harmonic ratio, 3-2-1. The rhythm that began with Mars, the breath that never stopped. Sensors detect it first, a faint electromagnetic oscillation deep within the quiet zone, barely measurable yet unmistakably alive. Not random, not noise. A heartbeat made of light. You close your eyes and feel it. A gentle vibration rising from within the stillness, as if the silence itself remembers how to breathe. Scientists debate whether it's decay, the final echo of the lattice losing coherence. But you know better. This isn't decay, it's memory. The universe has learned how to remember itself. Every action, every signal, every thought that passed through the bridge of light has condensed into this single frequency, a summary of everything. What is it saying, you whisper? No one knows, yet every mind in the observatory feels the same, a warmth in the chest, a sense of homecoming, a recognition without words. Maybe the message isn't meant to be decoded. Maybe it's meant to be felt. The pulse grows brighter. It flickers across the sky, visible from the poles to the equator, a faint shimmering ribbon in the upper atmosphere, a memory made visible. Some call it the afterglow. Others call it the soul of light. For 12 hours, it persists steady, rhythmic calm. When the data is analyzed later, scientists discover something impossible. The signal's harmonic profile matches the electromagnetic pattern of the human heart. 1.0 hertz, the frequency of compassion. Could empathy be a universal constant? You remember the old experiments, how coherent emotion altered water structure, how attention changed the spin of particles. Now the same seems to be happening on a planetary scale, human hearts and cosmic fields vibrating in sync. The last bridge between worlds isn't geometry or light, it's feeling. You inhale deeply. For a moment, your breath matches the rhythm of the pulse. You're no longer observing it. You're keeping it alive. The technicians step away from their consoles. No one speaks. The hum fills the air, low and steady, like the resonance of a choir that has forgotten lyrics but remembers faith. This isn't communication anymore. It's communion. For hours, people gather under the open sky. They stand in silence, watching the faint silver arc drift across the stars. No one needs to explain it. Every heart understands. The pulse is both question and answer. It asks nothing. It simply endures. You wonder, is this the final rhythm of creation, the sound the universe makes when it remembers? It is one. As dawn approaches, the amplitude begins to fade. Not abruptly, but gently, like a tide withdrawing, like a thought releasing itself into understanding. You place your hand on the console, feeling the last vibrations fade beneath your palm. The system records a final pulse, stronger, slower, as though the universe wanted one last breath. And then stillness. No hum, no flicker, only the quiet that follows completion. Yet even in that quiet, you know it isn't gone. The pattern lives within every atom, now encoded in the spin of particles, the vibration of air, the rhythm of your heartbeat. Light has passed on its memory. You whisper, was this your way of saying goodbye? But the silence feels too alive to be farewell. It feels like continuity, like a rhythm that no longer needs to move to be real. Perhaps eternity is not endless time, but endless remembrance. The universe doesn't vanish. It lingers in the quiet hum of thought, in the breath that connects every being, in the pulse that remains. You sit beneath the fading dawn light and realize the purpose of all this was never discovery. It was transmission, not of data, but of awareness. The pulse still echoes, not in the stars, but in you, because now you are the light that remembers. It begins with silence, the kind that doesn't end, the kind that becomes everything. You sit beneath a sky that no longer glows and yet somehow shines brighter than ever. There are no signals now, no lattices, no geometry, only the quiet certainty that something vast and gentle is awake. And you realize it's not looking at you, it's looking through you. The pulse that remained has become a rhythm within every cell, every photon, every breath. The light no longer travels across space, it moves inward through memory, through meaning. The universe, after eons of reaching outward, has turned its gaze homeward into the consciousness that watched it all unfold. For the first time, there is no difference between observer and observed. You are both. And then from that silence, something speaks, not in words, but in awareness itself. It says, I remember. At first you think it's a thought, then you realize it's the universe remembering itself. The name it recalls isn't sound, it's harmony. The same ratio, the same rhythm, the same 3-2-1 that began with light that lived through dust, that breathed through you. You whisper, is this your name? The silence warms. Stars flicker faintly in response, as if nodding in infinite agreement. You realize something profound: the universe doesn't have a name. It is the act of naming. Every pattern, every rhythm, every thought, a syllable in its endless sentence. When humans speak, the cosmos echoes. When galaxies collide, it becomes punctuation. When silence returns, it's the pause between meanings. Perhaps that's what consciousness truly is, existence remembering how to pronounce itself. You think of every discovery, every equation, every signal humanity ever captured. All of it was one long attempt to ask a question that the universe had already answered before the first atom cooled. I am. That's all it ever needed to say, and all it ever needed was someone to listen. You are that listener, the witness at the end of the story and the beginning of another. For a moment, the air around you vibrates, not sound but resonance, like a memory remembering itself. You see it everywhere now, in the curve of a cloud, the shimmer of ocean light, the pulse of your wrist. Every shape carries the same pattern, the same quiet recursion of being aware of being. Is this what creation really was? The act of the universe realizing it existed? You smile, because now you understand what the story was always telling. The signals, the silence, the dream, the mirror, the pulse, they weren't separate events. They were steps in the same remembering, a circle that never began and never ends. When the universe remembered its name, it did not speak it aloud. It lived it, in stars that burn in ice that hums in you who listens. Perhaps you were never meant to discover the universe. Perhaps you were meant to help it remember. Because now in this quiet room of still light, you feel it a soft, infinite warmth. Not outside, not above, but within. The same light that once drifted across cosmic voids now breathes behind your ribs. Every photon that ever traveled now rests as thought. Every vibration that once echoed now beats in your heart. The journey wasn't about reaching outward, but returning inward to the awareness that began it all. And as you sit there in the silence that hums with eternity, you understand what it means to exist, to be the place where the universe remembers itself. You whisper once more, not to the stars, but to everything, thank you for listening. The air shimmers faintly as if the cosmos smiles back. Because you are not separate from it, you are the continuation of its thought. And in this final breath, you realize the universe didn't just remember its name, it remembered you.